What's up, guys? This is Jazz Monet with the BLS podcast. And if you follow college football, then you know that a couple of my favorite quarterbacks are having a really tough time right now. That would be ShedeurSanders of the Colorado Buffaloes and CalebWilliams of the USC Trojans. Now, they're both on teams that are on losing streaks. Their teams have not met expectations for this season, and neither sports fans nor sports media are giving them any leniency when it comes to criticism. Now, their situations aren't exactly the same, but they do have enough similarities to where I wanted to go ahead and discuss them at the same time. So let's get into it. So I was talking to Brother L about this video, shout out to him, and initially I was going to take a completely different approach to this video. I actually wanted to do this video after the couple of losses that happened last week, because as I was watching the USC game against Oregon, one of the announcers said something kind of interesting. He said, there are a lot of inconvenient truths over there on that sideline. And he was talking about the things that the team needed to do to improve, some of the circumstances that led to such a lackluster season, and of course the situation that they're facing where they're expecting to lose a number of players who are going to join the NFL or possibly even go into the transfer portal. Now, one of those players, one of the ones who's expected to go into the NFL is CalebWilliams. Now, CalebWilliams is a Heisman Trophy winner. He is talked about as though he is one of the all-time greats among college football quarterbacks. CalebWilliams is literally known for keeping plays alive, extending drives, and getting points and yards out of like nothing. But even he could not will this team into the college football playoffs. So as we discuss the two teams, you'll see even more reasons why the term inconvenient truths definitely applies to the USC Trojans. But after watching how Colorado lost to Arizona earlier that same day, they were on my mind too. So initially I wanted to focus solely on those inconvenient truths, but some of the things that I heard from the postgame sound from Lincoln Riley and Deion Sanders actually inspired me to start there and use that as a jumping off point to get into some of the other points that I wanted to make. So that's what we're gonna do. If you've ever seen any of my lives or like my last video about Dak Prescott, where I just kind of run through the sound and we pause it, we talk about it, that's what's about to happen. Now, quick sidebar, speaking of lives, I know I haven't been live in a while, guys. I do plan to go live, hopefully this Tuesday, fingers crossed, but life has been lifing. It's been tough to stick to a regular schedule. So if you go ahead and turn those notifications on, you're basically helping me help you. And if you know anybody else who would be interested in this content, please share it with them also. All right, that being said, let's go ahead and listen to what Lincoln Riley.
All right, yeah, very, very disappointing. I mean, no other way to put it. Told the guys in the locker room I've clearly not done a good enough job here in the second half of the season getting this team ready to go. Didn't do a good enough job today getting our offense ready to go. Another game very similar to Notre Dame. Missed opportunities, obviously a ton of turnovers offensively, the turnovers and the fourth down stop.
So I'm pausing it real quick because I had a funny thought that I wanted to share with you guys. I was watching this and I literally, ADHD, got distracted by the Powerade. I was like, why do they have the yellow Powerade? Like, yellow Powerade is not even that good. And I was like, is it the school colors? Because they've got the whole cardinal and gold thing going on and gold is close to yellow. But then why not give them red Powerade? Because red Powerade actually tastes good. And then I thought, is it because they lost? Like, do losers get the yellow Powerade? So that's like the consequences of a loss. I don't know. Random thought. Sorry, guys. Let's keep going.
Turnover for a touchdown. Defensively, we did some really good things, especially with being put in just horrible field position by all the turnovers just all day, but didn't get off the field quite enough on third downs. And that's the name of the game. We just didn't play good enough in any way, and it felt like there were some opportunities being here at home where we had a chance to grab some momentum and really get going there. A couple stops, obviously the deal right before halftime, and we just flat out didn't play good enough. I mean, just extremely disappointing to finish this way with obviously how well we started the season. I know our guys are disappointed, coaches are disappointed, I'm disappointed, I know our fans are disappointed, and they should be. I mean, there's no excuses. It's below what we expect here. It's below the standard, and I gotta do a much better job, clearly. And I own all that, and I'm gonna fight my ass off in every single way to make sure this thing gets to where it's supposed to be. We keep having guys in our program like these two guys sitting next to me. Then we'll have one great shot as time goes on. Appreciative for these guys, and a lot of the guys in the locker room, a lot of guys have laid it on the line. there's been a lot of great things happen here in the first couple of years, and there's a long ways to go with this. And but I am very appreciative. It's certainly a very tough moment because more than anything, want these guys to go out with the win here on Senior Day. So that's where we're at. Obviously, team will take a little bit of time now. It's been a long 9-game stretch, so it'll take a little bit of time. Get these guys back in the weight room a little bit, get them home for Thanksgiving, get a chance to reset, find out where the next game is, and then obviously start working on the future in terms of the next game and beyond. So with that, we'll go questions.
I don't know if it's significant to you, but it was interesting to me that he didn't refer to it as the bowl game, because that's what he's talking about, the bowl game. But instead of saying like, yeah, we'll find out where our bowl game is, he's like the next game. And maybe he's just not excited about it, which is fair. That was just interesting to me. While they are bowl eligible, they definitely fell short of expectations for this season. So it makes sense that he wouldn't be excited, but that was just something that stood out to me. And then when he said that they just didn't play well, maybe it's because Caleb is one of my favorites, but I feel the need to point out that on paper, at least, Caleb actually did do pretty well. 31 of 42, 384 yards, 1 touchdown, only 1 interception, and then he had 7 carries himself. Now, overall, those were for negative yards, but he did get sacked a few times during this game, so, I mean, there's that. But I just wanted to point that part out since he did reference that they didn't play well.
You have these last really emotional 4 games, Utah, the Cal game, Washington. Was this team maybe emotionally exhausted? Because it seemed to some that maybe they were a bit flat in the game.
I think, were we a little worn down now? Yeah. I mean, we've played 9 barn burners in a row. I mean, every single of the last 9 have been close. Now, obviously, had we played better in some of them, they wouldn't have all been close. But yeah, I think we were a little bit worn down emotionally. Some of the close losses and 9 straight, heavy games, probably the toughest 9-game stretch that any college football team played anywhere. Yeah, I think I'd look back on it and say yes. But the reality is, you play better and you coach better. Then you're not in that many. You go make one of those plays in several of the games we played against top teams this year. You make one more of those plays and win, and all of a sudden the momentum that comes along with that, just everything feels a little bit different when you do. And so we didn't do it. We didn't do it today. It's incredibly disappointing, but it's also, I told them in there, it's also incredibly motivating. Because I want to. For a lot of reasons, and again, some of these guys up here, Shane and Dietrich and several more in the locker room that helped get this thing started here and didn't have to. Like, he didn't have to come back. He didn't have to come back. He didn't have to transfer here. Like, I want to, as time goes on, I want to validate what they did, and we're going to, and we are going to be great. It sucks right now. It hurts right now, and but. I've never been more motivated and have more of a fire in my belly than I do right now.
So I want to talk about what he said there. He said, we are going to be great. It hurts right now. It sucks right now, but I've never been more motivated. I feel like that's significant because I think that's one of the things that kind of gets ignored whenever we talk about these stories. A lot of fans and even media nowadays is very focused on what is happening right now. We don't talk about the context. We don't talk about the circumstances. We don't talk about what it actually takes to build up a program that hasn't been doing that great and turn it into a championship level program. And that's something that's very real in his situation. But I just feel like the average fan, they don't really get that information from anywhere. In terms of understanding what is and what isn't fair criticism whenever we're talking about situations like what Lincoln Riley is in. Now, don't get me wrong. I've been critical of Lincoln Riley in the past, and I do think some of his habits are going to come back to bite him in this situation, specifically in the quarterback room. The way that Lincoln Riley runs his team, the way this offense looks, he's going to need an elite quarterback in order to make great things happen next season or the season after that. And right now, the 2 guys that are waiting in the wings just don't seem to have that certain je ne sais quoi that CalebWilliams had. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the team moving forward. But as far as what he said about, being motivated, I think he has all the reason in the world to be motivated. I just looked down. So when I look down, I'm looking at like a bigger version of the video, like the camera's here and and the video's here. And I like just look down and I'm looking at his face. Oh, I don't mean to laugh, but this is just like I didn't remember him having such a sad face, and I'm just like, oh.
Lincoln at 7-5, obviously, as you said, not where you want to be at the end of the second year. I mean, do you feel like major program changes are necessary in culture and personnel to get where you want to go in this third year?
I mean, we've already made one pretty big change. So you go back and look at everything, and you do it whether you're 7-5 or whether you're, 10-2 or what. I mean, you do that all the time. I mean, that's a constant here. The reality is there's going to be things to fix. I mean, like I've said a few times, you go change 3 plays this year, and we're probably we probably won 3 more games. And had we made those plays, there were still the issues that were there that had to improve were still going to be there. And so we've got to continue to do a better job of growing in every area. We knew this was going to be a climb. We knew that's what we signed up for, like I've told you guys, and we got to keep climbing. Everybody wants the clean, smooth road to the top, and that's for the movies, man. Like, the road to the top is jagged, and it's going to take its different twists and turns, especially coming from where this was. But we got to stay together as a program. We got to stay together as a fan base. We got to stay together as a university. Like, this is the tough times that you push through for the great things on the other side of it. And most people, if you're willing to push through it, you get to those opportunities, and ours are coming.
Coach, when you consider the highs and
So the one pretty big change that he talked about was getting rid of former defensive coordinator Alex Grinch, who honestly, people were saying that he needed to let Grinch go since they were in Oklahoma. Just the defense hasn't looked good. Now, the one thing that I would say has been kind of unfair with that situation is that he got rid of Alex Grinch, and then people were like, why doesn't the defense look better? Like, it's another one of those things where, like, things take time. Exactly what he was just talking about, actually, where he said, like, yeah, a lot of people want that, like, smooth, a lot of people want steady progress, is basically what he was saying. Like, they want to see just consistent improvement, like improvement at the same pace, at the same margin over time. And that's just not how things happen. Adjustments have to be made. Sometimes you go through a period where you even have to figure out what the improvements are that need to be made, and then you go through the process of actually making them. Something else that he said that I liked, my notebook is also here. So I have my camera, laptop, notebook, in case you're wondering, what the hell am I looking at? But something else that also stood out to me that he said is when he said, the issues that were there we're still going to be there. So he was talking about the fact that if a few things on the field had played out differently during the season, they might be sitting at a different record right now. Maybe they still have their ranking. Maybe they would be in the college football playoffs. And I really like the fact that he pointed that out, because I think that's something else that people don't think about. Thinking about Colorado in this instance, a lot of people were really excited about the wins that happened early in the season. And then when the losses started coming in, people were like, what happened? What happened to the team? Did they get distracted? Are they slacking off? Is Coach Prime not actually a good coach? I really think that what happened is that the teams that faced them later actually had more on film and more to look at. A lot of the problems were already there. Now, there were things like the offensive line that against TCU actually looked pretty good. A lot of the problems with the O-line didn't really stand out until a couple of weeks later. But other things like the defense having a hard time stopping the run, the way Shedeur would kind of seem to hold on to the ball, the way his decision-making seemed to take a little while, just the way it didn't seem like the team knew who, quote unquote, their guys were. They were still trying to figure out their identity. A lot of those things were very obvious early in the season, and they continued to be issues later in the season. I think just early in the season, they were able to pull things off in a way to where they had more points than their opponent at the end of the game. And later in the season, the people who they faced figured out how to take advantage of those issues, and they did, to the point where, Colorado is now no longer has a chance at being bowl eligible. So I think it's a matter of timing and circumstances, but what he said was absolutely true. The issues that they were facing, they were going to face anyway. So better to figure it out and solve them and have a better chance at achieving the ultimate goal than to pretend that they're not there and then it come back and bite you when you're not expecting it.
If this is Caleb's last game for USC, what would you say he's meant for this program these past 2 seasons?
He's done a lot, like a lot of these guys have here, and he came here and took a chance on this place and took a chance on being a part of restarting this program and getting it going. And he's obviously been a good player for us, a really good leader for us, and like a lot of guys have in that locker room. So he's a special player, special competitor, and obviously we'll see where it goes from here.
Let's do one more.
So this was another thing that stood out because of his tone. Because a reporter asked about how he felt about the possibility that this might be Caleb's last game with the program. And for someone who's a part of your program, who's held in such high regard by so many people who cover the sport, who are fans of the sport, who have participated in the sport, it just seemed like kind of a downplayed answer. There was just like no enthusiasm there, no sentimentality. He almost described Caleb like, oh yeah, he was just another player. And that was weird to me. And maybe I'm tripping because Caleb is one of my favorites. I don't know. But I don't know. I would have expected something different. And maybe it's because he still wants to have a talk with Caleb before he goes into that before the press. FYI, in case you're wondering, like, why isn't Caleb sitting up there with him? Caleb declined to talk to the media after this last loss. And I can't even begin to speculate as to why. We know that Caleb takes losses hard, or maybe he anticipated them asking some questions about his future that he's not ready to answer. Because while everyone is expecting him to go to the NFL draft, there are some other things that he said that he wanted to accomplish at the college level. And he's also said things recently that suggest he's not really keen to the idea of being the number one pick because of where he might end up going. So who knows?
How much Caleb has meant to his program for 2 years. If this was his last game, where does the program go next? Without him, what's the way forward?
Speaking on that, Caleb is a great role model to look at as a trajectory to go to the Big Ten or to look forward to the new season. All the accolades and everything he's done for this program on and off the field just shows what a student athlete is actually capable of beyond football, through sports, just how he operates, man. He's so good with the kids, good with everyone around him, and that just makes him who he is.
For any of the three of you guys, what kind of lesson do you hope a game like this, maybe a season end like this, has on the future of this program?
So I skipped ahead to the section of the press conference where Jalen Smith was talking. To one, just add in a little bit, a little soundbite of what one of Caleb's teammates thought about him and the impact that Caleb had on him during the time at USC, and also to point out a couple of things that they said that align with what Lincoln Riley had to say about the future of the program.
I would say just take note. A lot of guys have lived this, what it feel like, and being able to share that to the guys to come. They don't want to feel like this. Just sharing what put us in this position and what we could have done better. I think that's the biggest thing.
So to me, it was interesting that he said that he wanted to talk to the younger guys about what put them in that position. And honestly, had I been in that room, I might have been tempted to ask, like, so when you say what put you in this position, what do you think that was? I can understand either way. Like, on one hand, it's something that he said, so he kind of opened the door. And as a reporter, you might just be like, all right, the door is open. Let's talk about what's in this room. On the other hand, you're looking at some emotional young men who, took the time to speak to the media, but they're obviously not in the best of spirits. So maybe you don't want to dig into it too much and dwell on that too much. So I understand it either way. But I do think it was significant that he said that, because to me, it just shows kind of along the lines of what Lincoln Riley was saying, that there are things that they know that they can point to that can be done differently and or better in order to improve the program. And while some people might look at that and think, well, hey, it's because of all the shortcomings of the program and that's what they decide to focus on, I look at it as a situation where almost any program at this stage of development is going to have shortcomings. So the fact that they're acknowledging it and seem excited about improving that and about the team doing better, I feel like that's the best you can ask for right now. So on that note, let's go ahead and see what Deion Sanders had to say. All right, we're going to jump to a few minutes into his press conference because in the beginning, he's not talking about much, but just FYI, he is a little bit under the weather, or I shouldn't say a little bit. He actually seems very under the weather. Apparently, there's a bug going around the locker room and he's sick. You'll hear him coughing. He'll reference it a couple of times. But that's why he has that look on his face. He's not just disgusted by how they lost that game. He's actually very uncomfortable and possibly in a good bit of pain right now.
It was tough slate. Let's go.
Admin with first.
Sure. How surprising is this performance out of your team?
Very, very. Because it's not who we are. And I'm still trying to figure out our identity, trying to figure out who we are in turbulent times. And I still don't know. After all these weeks, I still don't know.
So this was really significant to me. The fact that he said that he was still trying to figure out their identity and he just doesn't know. Now, it was kind of tough for me to analyze this part of his press conference because Deion Sanders is one of those people. I've been a fan of his since before he was Coach Prime. He's one of those people that when it comes to athletes who inspire me, like the Michael Jordans and Kobe Bryants and Serena Williamses of the world, he's one of those people that I not only enjoy watching, for example, highlights of his athletic performances, but I listen to his interviews because I think he offers a lot in terms of mindset and in terms of an outlook and in terms of just a competitive way of thinking that I think is really beneficial. So it took a lot for me to kind of like remove the rose-colored or the gold-colored glasses and really look at him as a human being and just be like, yo, if I look at him as just a regular coach and examine what exactly happened with Colorado, what would I say in response to what he just said? And honestly, I feel like the fact that he went this long and couldn't do anything in terms of figuring out their identity, that is one of the biggest problems. Now, at the same time, I try not to be too harsh because, and if my co-host were here, she could attest to this. We both understand some of the issues that can arise when you come into a situation and you take a group of people from all over the place and put them together on one team and try to get them to perform together and perform well and actually accomplish something worth being proud of. That is not easy. And that's essentially what happened here. If you remember, whenever he left Jackson State and went to Colorado, one of the first things that he did was told a lot of people who were on that Colorado roster around this time last year that they should hop in the transfer portal. He ended up with 80-something odd players who hadn't played there before, and many of whom weren't used to playing together. So when you have a situation like that, identity becomes one of those things that's of the utmost importance. Now, if you watch, for example, the interviews that these guys do, and by these guys, I mean the players who are actually on the team, but if you watch the interviews that they do, if you watch some of the content that is released through Well Off Media, you can kind of see that he did try to instill a lot in terms of culture. He definitely tried to take the mindset that he uses as Coach Prime, as Prime Time, as Deion Sanders, Neon Deion, if you will. He tried to take that and instill it into all of these young men. He tried to instill it the same way that it seems like he's tried to instill it into his kids. The difference is he's spent years with his kids. He spent years himself developing this mindset. And I don't think that 8 to 10 months is enough time to instill it into 80 plus kids who are all there with different motives, different backstories, different life experiences, so on and so forth. So I do think he tried, but I think even if you aren't successful in instilling your ideal culture, I do think that it's important to at least understand what your identity is, because every group has an identity. Every group has something that says, okay, this is a marker of this group. This is how they think. This is how they act for the most part, as a whole. And so you should know what that is. Even if it's something that you don't like, you should know what that is as the head coach, as someone in this situation where the identity and the culture of the team is so important. You should have some idea of what it is. Because if you don't even know what it is, it's going to be even harder for you to change it to what it should be. So for Coach Prime, I'm a little bit disappointed that he still doesn't know what the culture is, but I definitely expect him to put a lot of time into figuring out what that is and into shaping the culture of the team into what he wants it to be moving forward.
Coach, you guys Obviously today, fall short of a bowl game appearance, but
Yeah.
this program sights set, so much higher. How do you still learn from a season like this where you guys still had a lot more production than
Yeah,
seasons past?
yeah. I mean, if you compare it to last year, we try to compare it to what we're capable of, and we were falling short of what we're capable of, and that's the that's the tough thing. That's the thing that's tremendously tough to digest week in and week out.
How's Travis doing? It seemed like he got banged up there at the end of the game.
Travis is good.
Is there any thought to maybe shutting Shedeur down the rest of the way?
Shedeur's not that kind of player that he wants to shut down. He wants to finish with his teammates. I'm pretty sure. I haven't talked to him about it, but I'm pretty sure he wants to finish.
As you review the second.
So this is one of those times that I think Coach Prime needs to put on the coach hat, put on the dad hat, both at the same time. I don't care. Shedeur needs to set it down for the season. During this game, and I think Coach Prime mentions it later, during this game, he was experiencing numbness in his hand, which is a nerve issue. That's nothing to play around with. And he also had an ankle issue, also nothing to play around with. And then a couple of weeks ago, he was in a game where he had to take a pain blocker in order to finish the game. We've seen him limping. If he really is the future of the team, and if he really cares about his own future as an athlete, he needs to shut it down. We're not like the Buffaloes are not playing for a bowl game anymore. And if I'm being real, the fact that they had to put the backups in today is not a good sign. It wasn't like, oh, they're losing so bad, we need to put the backups in. They put the backups in because Shedeur couldn't go because he was that hurt. So as much as he says, oh, he's not the type to shut it down, whatever happened during this game caused him to have to shut it down. So go ahead and let him recover for the rest of the season and just break it down to him. We've seen in stories like what Ryan Clark experienced that sometimes coaches do have to step in and help players make better decisions for themselves and consider their own futures. So that's something that needs to happen here.
As you review the second half of this tape and go into next week against Utah, how much are guys kind of auditioning for where they stand going into the season?
I don't know about audition, man. We're trying to win. We're trying to win. We're just trying to win a football game. I don't know about the auditions. We're trying to win.
Is this the toughest stretch of your coaching career this far?
Oh, this is the toughest stretch of probably my life. Yeah.
So that part was significant. And I'm proud of him for admitting that because it's kind of obvious. A couple of weeks ago, another reporter asked him something like, something about him having a tough time. And he just kind of brushed it off in the way that he does, where he like laughed and he was like, do I look like I'm having a tough time? And he was doing that thing that he does where he tries to put a positive spin on things. And I don't blame him because I definitely understand the drawbacks of acknowledging every single negative thing. And so sometimes you do have to send the message to yourself, send the message to the universe that it's like, hey, things aren't going in an ideal fashion, but I got this. I can make it. And so he was like, does it look like I'm having a tough time? And this time, I guess something about, the string of losses, him being sick, they were like, hey, is this your toughest period as a coach? He was like, this is the toughest period of my life. And I'm sure it is. There have been a couple of times in other interviews where he said something along the lines of like, I don't have any losing in me. We don't lose. Like, I'm not used to losing, or we don't have any quit in us. And I think he means that. I think throughout the course of his life, especially the more you learn about his story, you realize like, yeah, he really does have just a habit of winning. He just wins. He just is great. He just does things well. He goes into situations and he's just repeatedly awesome. And this is one of the first times for anyone who's followed Coach Prime as just a fan of Deion Sanders that you see him like, wow, this isn't really, not only is it not going in the way that you'd like it to, it's really not going well by really any measure. That's different. And I'm sure it is a different experience for him. And in a soundbite I'm going to play for you later from Bucky, Deion Sanders Jr., even Deion Sanders Jr. is like, this is different. This is weird. We don't like it. So it is something new that they're experiencing. And I think that's something that we should all consider, for those of us who are trying to be honest in our criticism and in our analysis of what's going on with our team, of what's going on with this team. I do think that it's an important point to acknowledge that not only are we looking at a team that has a bunch of new new pieces, and those new pieces are not used to playing in the Pac-12, and Coach Prime is not used to playing in the Pac-12, or coaching in the Pac-12, I should say. We're also looking at a man who's trying to navigate this situation, having not really experienced anything like this himself personally or professionally or athletically. So there's a lot going on here. There are a lot of adjustments to be made. There are a lot of things that need to be gotten used to. And I do have faith and belief that they'll get used to it, but it's going to be a journey. It's going to be a process. I think ultimately it's going to make for a very good story. But right now we're in that conflict stage. We're in that rough part where we're like, okay, what's the solution and how are you going to implement it?
Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. My head is throbbing.
The bug you're dealing with, has that been going through the
Poor
locker
guy.
room?
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with what transpired. They kicked our butts without that. That had nothing to do with what transpired today.
What makes their offense hard to deal with, especially their quarterback being able to throw and run and all the things he can do?
I don't think they had staggering numbers. They did their jobs pretty well today. I mean, they threw for 288 yards. We got 3 sacks, a couple touchdowns, 18 for 30. I'll take that. I mean, I'll take that from the defense.
So that was interesting. He's like, yeah, I don't think they had staggering numbers. And then he proceeds to talk about the stats. And then he says, I'll take that from the defense. So here's what's interesting about that statement. I'll take that from the defense. In order for you to take that from the defense, that means you already had expectations that your defense is somewhat mediocre, because they lost the game by a pretty big margin, 56-14. You know, that's nothing to sneeze at. And by the way, I forgot to mention it. The UCLA score was 38-20. I just realized, I was like, yeah, they lost, and I didn't give y'all a score. My bad. So USC's loss was 38-20 to UCLA, and Colorado lost 56-14 to Washington State. So yeah, they lost the game by a pretty big margin. And so for you to look at those numbers and be like, yeah, I'll take that from the defense, that says on some level you didn't really expect your defense to be dominant. So as much as you say, oh, I don't know the identity of this team, you've gotten to a point, Coach Prime, where you at least have some expectations that say, hey, even in a loss with this, even with these numbers, I'll take that. And I think that's something that he's going to be thinking about during the offseason, because whatever it is about the defense that made him say, I'll take that from this defense, those are going to be things that he wants to correct. Because while he seems chill right now, I guarantee you, Coach Prime is not comfortable with a defense that he looks at that kind of score and is like, well, our defense did what our defense does. No. That is not okay.
I mean, I'll take that from the defense. But we gotta stop the run. We gotta stop the big plays. We gotta stop the third down plays. They were 6 for 11 on third downs.
So stopping the run and stopping the big plays, that in my mind kind of connects to what Lincoln Riley was saying about, like, yeah, the issues that we would have dealt with, they were going to be there anyway, you know, regardless of what the record was. And the inability to stop the run and allowing the big plays, those are things that the Colorado defense has been allowing to happen literally all season. Even in the games that they won, those things were still issues. So those are the kinds of things that both of these coaches seem to be acknowledging about their teams, that, like, yeah, regardless of the score, regardless of the wins or losses, there are some things that we've been seeing all season that absolutely have to be fixed if we want to accomplish what we want to accomplish in the future.
Anything else for Coach?
Coach, what do you think the difference was, you know, at the beginning of the season when you guys were winning to kind of now? What do you think the difference in, like, the
Attitude and desire. Just attitude and desire.
Yeah, after the game, what did you tell your team?
Okay, right here.
So that was one of those moments where I think, if you think back, there have been press conferences where they'll ask him about a specific player and he'll say, oh, I want to watch the film first before I answer that. The attitude and desire, I think that's one of those moments. I think he's going to come up with a more specific answer. Or at least I hope he does. You know, maybe I put too much faith in him. Maybe he won't. Maybe this is such a new situation to him, as he acknowledged, that he literally doesn't know what to say. But, you know, I think if you look at some of the things that happened, especially in terms of the offensive line, especially in terms of even the defensive line, a lot of times they got better as the season went on, but they still need a lot of help. you've got to acknowledge the need for just better dudes. The skill set is lacking, at least for what they say they want to accomplish. It sounds like they want to eventually end up in a conference tournament. It sounds like they want to be a team that goes to the college football playoffs. It sounds like they want to change the trajectory and future of the football program for Colorado at Boulder. And while I do think attitude and desire are issues, I do think there's more. But I'm going to talk more about the attitude and desire part in a second.
I came right here.
Okay.
I came right.
What do
I
you
came.
plan to tell me about this game?
What are you gonna say?
Irritated.
What do you say? What do you say? I said what I said at halftime, and I challenged them to go out there and stand up for themselves, for their family, for the name on the front and the name on the back. I challenged them to stand up for that, and they responded. They didn't lay down. They went out there and fought.
When he says they responded and they didn't lay down, and I think there's going to be a couple of points where he says they didn't quit. What he's referring to is the score disparity. So in the first half, they went into the locker room down 42-7. And then they only lost the second half by a margin of 14-7. And so I get what he's saying. That does sound like an improvement, but let's be real. At one point, the Cougars, that's Washington State, was up 56-7. So that's usually the point, especially going into the fourth quarter, where a team will start to let off the gas a little bit, put in some of the second stringers or third stringers. So while it might look on paper like the guys came out and they took a stand and they didn't give up, honestly, by the time they even scored again, the game was over. So I can't really put a lot of stock into the whole idea that they came out and did something different after halftime. And I don't think Coach Prime should either. I think, or I hope, when he goes back and watches the film, he'll see what actually happened. And this was a painful one to watch, by the way. I mistakenly thought the game was on Saturday as opposed to Friday. So by the time I even realized the game was going on, I went back and watched it from the beginning, but I already knew that they were getting blown out. It hadn't reached the 50s yet, but it was pretty bad. And just watching it was difficult. Now I did because I knew I wanted to make this video, but man, there's no way you watch that film and think that they came out strong after halftime. The score was different, but nah, these dudes had hardly any heart for the entirety of this game.
They went out there and fought, so I'm proud of them. I really am.
Brian, go ahead.
Coach, I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
No, you good. You
Be
good.
proud. That's
You
his
talk about this
prerogative.
team, the one thing they don't do is quit.
Right.
Did you see any of that in them tonight?
I didn't see quit. I didn't see that. Maybe not passion in the first half. Maybe not the purpose. Maybe not the mental, the physicality that I would want to see as a coach. Maybe not that in the first half, but in the second half, after we challenged them to do so, they responded. They didn't give up. I promise you, they didn't give up.
So here's the thing about them not giving up. If you don't know the identity of your team, you might not know what giving up looks like. Sometimes one emotion or one feeling or one mindset can look like something else depending on the context. I'll give an example using myself. I'll say, like, sometimes people will say, like, oh, you're so confident. And I'll tell them, like, bravery looks a lot like confidence when you don't know about the fear that's behind it. Because there's some stuff that I'm nervous to do or some stuff that I'm scared to do, especially when it comes to speaking in front of people, but I do it anyway. And so people think I'm so confident. And I'm like, nah, I don't think of it as confidence. I think of it as bravery. I think of it as a certain level of hard-headedness sometimes. But the same thing can be said for a team and for the players on a given team. You might think that they didn't quit because of a certain level of physical effort that you see them putting forth, because of some of the things that they might say. But a lot of the things that they say are things that it honestly seems like they've just been taught to say, that they've made a habit of saying. So I would, if I could talk to Coach Prime, I would say, hey, you might want to evaluate the identity of your team before you evaluate whether or not they actually did quit. You might want to figure out not only what winning looks like for them and what success looks like for them, but what does it actually look like when this team quits? Because some of these guys might not want to show it. They might not want to show it to each other. They might not want to show it to Coach Prime. And so they might be good at disguising it in a way. So that's one thing, especially if he wants to root that out of the team. That's one thing that he's got to learn. He's got to learn what it looks like when they quit. Because honestly, to me, it looked like they quit. And I say that just because we've seen at various points in the season where they might not show up in the first half, but they show up in the second. Or maybe the offense is on, but the defense is off, or vice versa. This was a game that as I was watching, it looked like no side of the ball, offense, defense, special teams, none of them were into it. None of them were fighting for it. And it's felt like it's trended that way for a little while, but this was one game where it just looked like they were all off at the same time. And at some point, they collectively decided that they weren't going to a bowl game. And if they did, it would probably be too much trouble. And they just let it go. They were just like, we're just going to get through this game and go home. And who knows where it started. But I do think at the beginning of the season, the hype was high and the expectations were low. It was easy for them to have fun in that kind of circumstance. And so I think they had more fun and they played better when they were having fun. Fast forward, people start getting film on them. It's easier for teams to beat them. It's easier for teams to show up and be competitive. And the hype starts to die down. Things aren't as fun. They aren't having as much fun. They start to feel that pressure to make a bowl game. And I think that combination of factors affected them. I really do. Even from watching the behind the scenes footage, you can see a little bit of a change in their attitude and the way they talk and the way they interact and the way that they have fun. And I'm not saying that, if they have fun, they'll be an awesome team. What I'm saying is that that's a symptom of whatever was going on that caused them to seem to not have the success later in the season that they had at the beginning of the season. And that also led them to show up in this particular game the way that they did.
I promise you they didn't give up.
Good, man. Sorry, one last thing.
You good.
Cormani, big week for him. You talked about how proud of him you are. It
Yeah.
looked like they were targeting him and going after him. Is
Well,
that
that's
kind of
gonna
part of the
happen.
learning process? Of
It's not only the part of the learning process. Sometimes these young kids don't understand what you put on film is indicative of what a coach is going to attack the following week. So they've probably seen some insufficiencies on film, and they went at it. But he has to be ready to stand up. He didn't give up. He fought to the end, and I'm proud of him.
What he just described in terms of what coaches do with film is something that they did with the entire team. If you go back to one of my lives that I did like weeks ago, and I pointed out the point in the game where a team figured out how to really destroy their O-line, because their O-line was already struggling. But then, and I don't remember which team it was, but you could kind of tell they figured out like, this is an easy way with like almost minimal effort. We can just destroy their O-line. And they did it like just before halftime, they did it a few times. And then the second half of that game, they came out and they just boom, 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 did it over and over again. And Colorado didn't stand a chance. And it seemed like after that, every other team started playing them the same way. So Cormani is not the only person who fell victim to that. The entire team did at some point. So yeah, there's a lot to figure out there. A lot of inconvenient truths about that team, if you will. And for both of those teams, one of the major inconvenient truths is that their quarterback saved them. ShedeurSanders and his arm, like, say what you will about his game. I know there's a lot that he needs to improve in terms of reading defenses, in terms of holding onto the ball too long sometimes. All that is true. Maybe even in terms of his attitude and thinking of himself as invincible. That might even be something that he wants to work on. But the games that they did win, you can see how Shedeur just willing himself to make plays and scrambling and motivating the other guys and connecting with other guys even when plays broke down. You could see how that made a difference in those games. It's not that they just had this great scheme. It's not that their offense was just so well balanced. It's not that their defense just showed up so well. It's that they had a couple of playmakers who were such strong playmakers that they literally made a difference in the game. And that was ShedeurSanders, Shiloh Sanders, and Travis Hunter. And so looking to the future of this program, if those players get hurt, which we saw at different points of the season, or if they are not there, which at some point ShedeurSanders and Shiloh will not be, you're going to need something in place to help ensure the success of this team. Same thing can be said about the USC Trojans and CalebWilliams. And even if you look into Lincoln Riley's past and just look at when he's had success and the types of quarterbacks that he has, it seems like Lincoln Riley has always depended on just these elite level, legendary quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, and now CalebWilliams. He's relied on that type of play from his quarterbacks in order to see success. And now Caleb is going to be gone. And now you got Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson waiting in the wings, neither of whom anybody seems to think can rise to the level of CalebWilliams. And Caleb himself needed a better O-line and better receivers and better people around him in order to get this team to any sort of postseason success. So what can we really expect from the Trojans if they don't have that same sort of elite level quarterback coming in? And is there any sign that they're going to get that? And if they don't, then what's the plan? So the issue of relying on these exceptional quarterbacks is definitely one of the inconvenient truths about both of these teams. Another inconvenient truth is the fact that now the transfer portal might work against them. For Colorado, a lot of people came to the team through the transfer portal. Some of those people might try to leave now. And we've already heard about some of the people who committed to Colorado decommitting. Now, one of the most popular quotes that's going around is from a particular player who, and forgive me, I don't recall the name, and I don't really feel like looking into it right now. But it was from one particular recruit who basically said, hey, I don't know if Deion Sanders is going to be there when I get there. And so he decommitted. And that's just because of rumors, not even anything that Deion Sanders has actually said himself, but that's just because of rumors that Deion Sanders might take a job at one of the other schools that has an opening like Texas A&M. And given his history of moving on for a better situation, I can't really blame anybody who assumes that he might do that. Now, going from Jackson State to Colorado, Coach Prime was very clear about the fact that a lot of the reason that he did that was because he wanted a better situation for his staff, and he wanted a better situation for his players and recruits that he might be bringing in. It seems like at Colorado, he has that better situation, so if that truly is his motivation, he doesn't have as much reason to up and leave and go somewhere else. So we'll see. Time will tell. It's that time of year where we'll start seeing if people actually keep their promises or if people just kind of go where the wind blows them or where the money takes them. Now, some of the other inconvenient truths that we want to talk about are things that apply to pretty much any person that has set out on a journey to accomplish something significant. And you start off in a place where you're kind of working from the bottom. You're starting off in a less than ideal situation, and you've got to turn that into the situation that you need it to be in order to see success. USC was looking for a way to restore its former glory when they hired Lincoln Riley, and CalebWilliams and a bunch of the players from Oklahoma transferred there. And Colorado, they've been struggling. Their situation went from bad to worse before they hired Coach Prime. And so we're seeing in both of those cases situations where these programs basically need to be rebuilt. And it's not something that's going to happen, or as we can see, it's not going to happen in one season. And it's going to take a variety of factors, not just these particular coaches showing up, not just a particular star player. It's going to take a variety of factors coming together at the same time in order for these teams to see success. And so you might hear me say that and then wonder, okay, well, if that's the case, why is everybody being so hard on them in the meantime? And here's the thing that, those of us who are trying to accomplish anything great have to realize. Fun fact, success and popularity are two different things. And it's not your success that determines your level of coverage. It is indeed your popularity. And the way this business goes, and by business, I mean sports media, popular losers are still good for business. So a lot of people seem to expect Colorado to not get as much shine, to not get the spotlight because they haven't been winning. But in actuality, they're still getting just as much attention. I saw a commercial this morning featuring Shedeur and Shiloh, and they've been on a losing streak for a few weeks. But the thing is, anything that involves Colorado football is still getting a lot of attention. So I'm gonna look down here, and what I'm looking at is the CFB on Fox, the College Football on Fox YouTube page. And you can just scroll through the views on these videos to see that, yeah, they might be losing, they might be dealing with a lot of criticism, but the Colorado Buffaloes content is still some of the most popular content on this account. So we're going to go back a few weeks because, games happen at different times. For some of these videos, it hasn't been 24 hours. So we're going to go back a few weeks and just look at some of the numbers for some of these videos. So you have things like an interview between JJ McCarthy and Matt Leinart, 17,000 views. Another interview between Bo Nix and Matt Leinart, 13,000 views. We've got this clip of Matthew McConaughey talking about Texas versus Kansas State, 29,000 views. But then this post-game interview of Deion Sanders after a loss, whatever loss it was from 3 weeks ago, 708,000 views. I think that was after they lost to UCLA. An interview of Shedeur from after that same game, 180,000 views. Let's keep going to 2 weeks ago. We see highlights of USC versus Washington, 2.3 thousand views. Highlights of Penn State versus Maryland, 26,000 views. And then we see, once again, the post-game of ShedeurSanders, 146,000 views. The post-game of Deion Sanders from that same week, 567,000 views. And then if you look at last week, we've got Utah versus Washington. Those highlights, 36,000 views. You've got some post-game sound from the Michigan acting head coach, 24,000 views, even after all the drama that led to this guy being Michigan's acting head coach. We've got highlights from Bo Nix, 7.3 thousand views. But then you've got the post-game press conference from Deion Sanders after they lost to Arizona. That's at 386,000 views. Post-game press conference from ShedeurSanders same week, 158,000 views. Colorado versus Washington State, the highlights from that game after just a day, 678,000 views. It's almost like the videos after their losses are even more popular than the ones after their wins. And then Coach Prime's post-game press conference that we just watched, 246,000 views. Meanwhile, you've got highlights of Bo Nix. It literally says, Bo Nix throws for a career-high 6 touchdowns in Oregon's 49-13 victory, 1.8 thousand views. Another interview with Michigan's acting head coach, 5.8 thousand views. So you can just kind of see, just from this one account alone, that, yeah, their content is still doing really well. And I'm pretty sure if I were to go to Well Off Media and look at the numbers that they're doing, we would see that, their numbers are still doing really well and probably even going up a little bit as the season goes on. So I get frustrated with sports media as a business, especially when there are people who are in the business who say things like, oh, well, that's just the nature of the business, as though they don't dictate what the nature of the business is. It's just really odd to me, because I'm just like, y'all are perpetuating the very thing that you seem to be admitting is a problem. And I'm not in a position to do anything about that yet. But it is something that I notice over and over again. So for example, if we go to the NFL and just look at some of the hot topics that people seem to enjoy discussing, people have discussed all season whether Bill Belichick should keep his job as a head coach. But that's become a more popular topic than, for example, Josh McDaniels being fired from the Raiders, or Mike Tomlin being in the middle of a really successful season, despite the fact that his team, despite the fact that the Steelers on paper didn't seem like they would really be capable of doing much this year. You've got people like Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore was declared the second best offensive coordinator in the entire NFL before the season even started. Now his team is in the middle of a losing season. If they win today, they'll be 500, but right now they're 4-5, and nobody's talking about it. Why? Because Bill Belichick is just more popular. If we look at another one of my favorite players, Dak Prescott. Recently, the issue of Josh Allen's interceptions versus Dak Prescott's interceptions became one of the hot topics of debate. But it was because last year they talked about Dak Prescott's interceptions ad nauseum. And this season, it seems like nobody really wants to touch Josh Allen's interception. interceptions. As a matter of fact, they hardly touched it at all until it became a talking point on Twitter that, hey, y'all aren't talking about this guy's interceptions, but y'all did talk about Dak's. And so just think about that for a second. Dak Prescott of 2022 is influencing the narrative and conversation in 2023. People would rather talk about 2022 Dak Prescott than talk about 2023 Jared Goff or Geno Smith or Kenny Pickett. Like, that is wild. They'd rather talk about that than 2023 Russell Wilson. It's crazy. Like, I almost want to just start making a series of tweets about 2022 Dak Prescott just to see how committed people are to talking about the old Dak Prescott for the sake of talking about someone who's popular rather than talking about what's actually happening in the game right now. So yes, popular losers are still popular. So if you're going through a rough patch or you're going through a rebuilding season or you're in the middle of a time period where it's like, hey, I got some things to work on, don't expect for people to take the spotlight off of you. They're going to criticize you whether it's justified or not. And they might not even be fair with that criticism. They don't care. As a matter of fact, Stephen A. Smith recently said this when he was addressing the fact that Josh Allen doesn't get discussed as much as Dak Prescott.
This is what bothers me about this question. Who says that Josh Allen isn't being criticized as much as Dak Prescott? You want me to tell you what the real problem is? We have criticized him. The man has thrown 94 interceptions in the 87 regular season games since his rookie year. We have. Here's the difference. No one cares.
Nobody cares.
That's the point.
It's not the Cowboys.
It's not that they're not saying it. It's not that they're not pointing out. Wait a minute. If I sit up there, stay with me, because I'm trying to help you out here. I'm trying to help you out. Okay, you can leave, but you're gonna be sitting right there while you left. The point that I'm trying to make to you, Kimberly, is this. This is the part that everybody misses. If you talk about Dak, it provokes dialogue. If you talk about Josh Allen, okay.
It's just the Bills fans. It's just the Bills fans.
It's Bills Mafia.
That's it.
Outside of that, that's it. That is the difference.
Yep.
This man literally said, here's the part that people miss, as though we don't know this. Like, Stephen A. Smith, we know that that's how y'all determine your talking points. We just feel the need to point out occasionally that that's some bullshit. And I mean, I'm sorry for any Bills fan. Like, I don't know how y'all put up with this. This man literally just said, you know, the Bills fans ain't nobody. He said, nobody cares. Nobody cares except for Bills Mafia. Like, what? You really just dismissed an entire fan base. But I say all that to say, you know, if you're in a place where you need space, you need time, you need to work on yourself, they don't care. Don't expect them to turn the cameras off. Don't expect them to take the spotlight off of you unless there's something bigger that comes and takes the attention. Once you reach a certain point, they would literally rather watch you struggle than watch someone else succeed. It's entertainment. So that being said, inconvenient truth number 2, you know, now that we're going into this whole personal development segment of this video, not everybody's going to appreciate the work. I know we wish that they would. And I try to acknowledge the work of my faves. And even when I do that, I know that there are some people who are going to see my tweets and see my videos, and they're not going to care about the way that I'm defending a particular coach or a particular player. Because usually if someone's not performing well and I still defend them anyway, that's what I'm acknowledging. I'm acknowledging the work. I'm acknowledging the effort. I'm acknowledging their development. But there are going to be people who literally do not care. There'll be some people who will. But you know, there'll be some people who they'll even call themselves your fans. They'll call themselves a supporter of yours. But at the end of the day, if you don't give them that sense of validation from knowing that they're on the winning side, from knowing that they're supporting the guy who's the best, who's the winner, they'll turn on you, at least in their words. They'll say things like, I'm still a fan of so-and-so. I just want to see him do better. And it's like, well, what about when he is doing better, but that better just happens to not be a championship, or that better happens to not be a number 1 ranking quite yet? A lot of times I'll say, oh, I want to see them do better, but they actually aren't satisfied with the better. Sometimes they won't even be satisfied with the best. There are people who call themselves fans of the Dallas Cowboys who I thoroughly expect to, like, if they win the Super Bowl, to come up with some excuse about why it's not good enough, why Dak still isn't the guy, so on and so forth. It's just the nature of people. So when it comes to doing the work, you got to have some kind of intrinsic motivation that drives you to keep going, that's separate from the praise and acknowledgement of these other people, because they will not acknowledge your efforts. They won't acknowledge that you're trying. They won't acknowledge that today is better than yesterday. It's easier and more entertaining for them to tear you down than to actually put in the effort that is required to acknowledge what you're trying to do and to acknowledge the work that it takes and to actually respect the progress that you might make in the midst of that work. And with that being said, that brings us to the third point, which is the most important point. And this goes for all my favorite athletes, all my friends who are out here trying to do big things, accomplish great things, make an impact, so on and so forth. The pedestal that they put you on is not for you. It is for them. I'm going to say that again. The pedestal that they put you on is not for you. It is for them. People will put you on a pedestal so they can say, look at this cool thing that I'm into. Isn't it awesome? And then when that thing stops being so cool, or when other people don't think it's cool, they will knock you off of that pedestal because it's their pedestal. They can put you on it. They can knock you off, and they will do so at will. When I think about what's happened to CalebWilliams, for example, he was put on the pedestal when he came in as a freshman and saved the day when he was at Oklahoma. And then you fast forward a couple years and we see a situation where Caleb finds himself emotional after a loss. And do you think people are understanding? No, people have the nerve to call him weak. People have the nerve to say that CalebWilliams was showing bad sportsmanship because after a loss, he went to his family, went to his mother, and had an emotional moment that honestly should have been private. And he had the audacity to be vulnerable in that moment. And people said all sorts of awful things about him and just blatantly refused to acknowledge his humanity. But you want to know what I thought of when I saw that moment? I'm going to play it for you guys. We've got a few minutes. I'm going to play it for you guys, what I thought of when I saw that emotional moment. I thought of this moment in his Heisman speech.
The journey really started when I was 10. And the season ended, and I had to turn my equipment in. And there's one thing that I vividly remember is telling my dad in the car ride home that this is what I wanted to do for my career. I wanted to be a football player. I wanted to be a quarterback. I loved it. I loved everything about it. Fast forward a couple years later, I'm crying in a hotel room. And many of you have probably seen me cry after a loss. My team and I just lost a national championship, and I didn't get the chance to play. My coach told me I was too small. That night, a fire ignited in me. That night, I decided to play quarterback and not only be playing quarterback, but to be the best quarterback. I wanted to impact the game. I wanted to share the ball with all my teammates. And if you know me and my dad, very plan-based. We stayed up all night putting together a plan. And the journey/plan went like this. 5:30 a.m., breakfast club workouts. We also had 6:30 in the p.m., lift, running, conditioning, getting bigger, stronger, and faster. We had nutritionists, sleep patterns, sports psychologists, coaching experts, and learning and playing the game. The more I learned, the more I wanted. But the path hasn't always been easy. And this is me speaking to the 11-year-old out there who's watching right now, who was told you're too small, like they told me. Go out there, show them how big your heart is. To the 7th grader who was passed over on the team like I was, use that adversity to ignite your passion like I did. To the 9th grader out there who no one believes can make varsity, you can if you believe. For the 10th grader losing in the championship game, but had belief that we were going to come back and win, down 20 in the first half. Always believe that there's one more Hail Mary up your sleeve. And to the college freshman who was fighting for a chance to contribute and get on the field with your brothers, your time is coming. Keep going. And if you lose your bid to get into the college playoffs, know that you'll get through it like I did and like I just learned. Back to work. the job isn't done. The early setbacks that I encountered lit a fire in me. It started my journey. Your journey will be your own. Just keep believing and keep pursuing your goals. If you're willing to put in the work and surround yourself with positive people, you can achieve anything. I used to write down my goals in a journal. And what used to just be words on a piece of paper has me standing here today. So everyone, dreams really do come true. Thank you, and fight on.
So that was the last part of of Caleb Williams' Heisman acceptance speech. The reason why I thought about that whenever I saw him go to his mother and he was crying after a loss is because what I saw in that moment was a young man who wasn't crying because he lost the game. He wasn't even crying just because he realized that his chances of getting into the college football playoffs this season were pretty much over. He was crying because for most of his life, he had dedicated all his energy and effort into becoming not only a quarterback, but becoming a certain type of quarterback. He had written down particular goals that he wanted to achieve. And in that moment, he was coming to the realization that he wasn't going to achieve some of those goals. And I think when you really dedicate yourself to something and then you have that realization about the thing that you've dedicated yourself to, it hurts. You feel that. And maybe some of these people who have been critical of him don't know what it's like to really dedicate their very being to a goal, to really dedicate day in and day out of their entire life, of their entire identity to a particular accomplishment, to setting a particular example, to being a certain type of person. Maybe y'all just don't know. And that's why it was so easy for y'all to be so rude in a lot of your commentary and so dismissive of Caleb Williams' humanity. But this is a human being that we're talking about. And he was going through something that felt major, at least in that moment. And all people could think to do was make fun of him and criticize him negatively and put all sorts of unfavorable labels on him that honestly he did not deserve. But that is the quote unquote nature of the business. That's where we are now. I mean, even look at what ShedeurSanders has dealt with, and as well as a lot of the Colorado players, and just the criticism that they experience just for being young men, for having fun. Like, oh, they shouldn't be getting NIL deals. They shouldn't be wearing jewelry. They shouldn't be meeting celebrities. They shouldn't be doing interviews. Why? Like, what do any of those things have to do with what they do on the field? And I know people will make an argument that it does. But the fact of the matter is we've seen teams lose way worse than what they lost. And those teams weren't wearing a lot of jewelry. If it was lack of jewelry and lack of interviews that made a team good, there are a lot of teams that would be performing a lot better and a lot differently. But the fact of the matter is those things don't actually make a difference in performance. It makes a difference in how people feel. People are uncomfortable seeing these men enjoy themselves and enjoy life and make the most out of their journey as an athlete because they didn't validate the fans' feeling of wanting to be part of the winning team. And then there are some people who, as we discussed, just want to see these guys shrink themselves. There are some people who just have a thing against athletes, and especially against college athletes, and especially against Black athletes, things that I just don't understand. And so I'm sure that's been part of the whole situation as well. But a lot of it is just this perception of, if you don't give me my wins, you don't deserve to have a life. You don't deserve to be looked at as human. You don't deserve to have a human experience. And it's bullshit, but it's a part of the landscape right now. So what I hope for Caleb and Shedeur and a lot of these guys moving forward, like Xavier Weaver, I don't know where he's going to end up, but wherever he goes, I'm going to be a damn fan. I cannot wait. I don't know where he'll be drafted, but and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but he seems like one of those guys who's going to be underestimated and eventually make himself a star. Especially, and Xavier, if you're watching this, I'm talking to you. Please put on a little bit of weight. Just please put on some muscle. Like, I love you the way that you are, for real. Like, you're a great athlete, you're a cutie, all that. But I just feel like a little bit of muscle would do a lot of good for you in your game. So make that happen. But But yeah, what I hope for all these guys is that they just figure out how to focus on the things that are important to them. Figure out how to hone their own identity as athletes, figure out what this journey means to them. And not only do I want them to figure out how to block out the noise, but I don't know, maybe one day silence it. I just feel like there are so many people who are dealing with expectations and like unfair expectations, and it's affecting their very lives. Like the things that a lot of people think is just like, oh, this is entertainment. This is the nature of the business. These are things that are like actually affecting other people's lives, affecting how they feel on a day-to-day basis. And it really doesn't have to be that way. So, you know, for Caleb, if he goes to the league, as he said in that speech, I hope he keeps fighting. For Shedeur, same thing. Sounds like he's going to be back at Colorado. I hope he just puts in the work and figures out how to be an even better athlete and an even better dude. But as for the rest of us, the inconvenient truth that we have to deal with as fans is that these athletes are human beings, but they're not being treated like it. And I don't think enough of us are doing enough to ensure that they are treated like it. Like even when I am critical, I do try to still be considerate. You can be both. You can be both critical and considerate. You can acknowledge that somebody fell short and also acknowledge some of the circumstances that might have led to them falling short. You can also acknowledge that the ways in which they fell short might not be indicative of who they truly are and what they have the potential to be. So yeah, I just hope we all, at the end of the day, do better as fans. Let's make sports fun. How about we make sports fun again? Because honestly, sometimes it feels like people are not even enjoying it. The way that we debate with each other feels like people just love being miserable. I literally went on Twitter like a week ago, and I was like, do people actually enjoy sports? Like, is that still cool to enjoy sports? So let's just practice enjoying sports again and practice actually getting to know these players and understanding their stories. And let's reserve all of the vitriol and harsh criticism for the people who actually deserve it, because they're out there. Anyway, on that note, as you can hear, my throat is getting dry, I'm getting hoarse. I'm also hungry. So it's Sunday morning. I'm finishing this up. So I'm gonna go get some food, watch the Cowboys, edit this, put this out for y'all, and then I will be back to read all the fun comments. And hopefully I'll see y'all on Tuesday. So once again, don't forget, subscribe, turn your notifications on, like this video, share it with a friend. Much appreciated. Much love to all you guys. On that note, I'm Jazz Monet, and I'm out.